Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. At the parent-teacher conference, I, as the class teacher, had invited the parents. However, my fiancé Amias, who had set aside his work, accompanied a mother and daughter to attend. After the conference ended, the daughter of that woman tagged me in the group chat. At Teacher Lee, when will my dad come home? At Teacher Lee, can you give my dad back to me? I posted the wedding invitation from Amias and me in the class group chat, which instantly caused a stir. Amias, however, lost control and shouted at me, "Can you stop doing this? Charlotte is a single mother raising her child. Do you know how hard that is as a young lady from a wealthy family?" Later, I called off the engagement and transferred to Beijing after learning the truth. Amias chased me to the airport, his eyes red, tightly holding my hand. "Laura, can we start over?" Chapter 1. The parent-teacher conference on Friday was the last lesson of my teaching career. 2 hours later, I would be heading to the principal's office to hand over the final materials and say a complete goodbye to this place that had taken away 6 years of my youth. Standing at the podium, I glanced down. My fiancé Amias and Charlotte were sitting together like a couple, a handsome man and a beautiful woman, drawing the attention of the other parents around us. "I really envy how good your relationship is," one parent whispered. "Emma's mom looks so young. She doesn't look like she's ever had children," another added. "Yeah, they look like sisters standing next to each other," someone else said. Charlotte blushed slightly in embarrassment but then gave me a triumphant glance. The man beside her smiled, watching Emma and adjusting her workbook. When he noticed my silent gaze, he looked up at me. His eyes were complex, mixed with a trace of reluctance. His lips moved as though he wanted to say something. I lowered my eyes, staring at the transfer request form prepared on the podium. My fingers trembled slightly. I thought my heart had already died. A week ago, I had prepared all the materials and made the decision to leave. But I never expected him to attend the parent-teacher conference with Charlotte, appearing before me as a sweet, happy family. And what about me? What do I mean to him? What is my place as his fiancé? Everything before me was so shocking. My heart felt like it had been stabbed with a blunt knife, aching with every beat. The English teacher beside me noticed my distress and came over to support me, asking with concern, "Ms. Lee, are you feeling unwell? Do you want to rest in the next room? I can take over the rest of the meeting." I suppressed the momentary surge of emotions, nodded in thanks, and walked out of the classroom with my materials. Suddenly my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, took a deep breath, and adjusted my tone before answering. "Mom, I'm doing what you said. Everything is arranged. I'll be home next month." The voice on the other end of the line trembled slightly. "Good. It's good you're coming home." Looking back, Charlotte had returned to the country 3 years ago. For these 3 years I have lived in a nightmare every day. She was Amias's childhood neighbor, a girl he grew up with. She went abroad for high school, married and divorced. She returned to the country alone with her young daughter. During the time she was gone, Amias and I had been together from university to engagement for 6 years, with a small home in the big city. I thought happiness in this world was nothing more than this. Until Charlotte, dressed in a long gown, stood before me holding a little girl. Amias gently introduced them. "Laura, this is my childhood friend Charlotte. And this is Emma, Charlotte's daughter." I looked at them standing together, feeling an inexplicable unease. Charlotte smiled sweetly, saying, "Laura, I just came back to the country and am unfamiliar with many things. I'll need to trouble Amias a lot in the future. I hope you won't mind. They say a woman's intuition is often right." And indeed my unease was not without reason. Chapter 2. From that day on, Amias kept leaving the house under the pretext of helping Charlotte settle down, continuously missing our dinners, anniversaries, and even my birthday. He even arranged for them to stay in a house in the neighboring school district, and used his position on the school board to have Emma transferred to my class. I questioned him in disbelief. That house in the neighboring school district was meant for our future kids when we get married. How could you give it to someone else? Amias's expression couldn't hide his annoyance. "You're really going to make a fuss about a single mother? Laura, I never knew you could be this malicious." Sometimes, late at night after we had already gone to bed, the phone would suddenly ring, and Amias would quickly pick up the call and walk out to the balcony to close the door. In the darkness, I would silently open my eyes, staring through the glass, watching him gently console another woman. Amias and I fought more and more because of Charlotte. Eventually, I grew tired of arguing and stopped fighting back. Until the engagement party last week. I was dressed in a simple white gown, greeting guests and making small talk while also calling Amias, urging him to hurry up. He kept saying he was in a meeting but would come as soon as it was over. The host had already urged him 3 times. It was time for the ring exchange, and everyone was waiting for the groom to make his entrance. I paced nervously backstage, calling him again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Suppressing my anger, I smiled and toasted every guest, apologizing to everyone that the engagement party had to be rescheduled. When I got home, I lay exhausted on the couch and checked my phone. I saw Charlotte's post. "You are my youthful joy, my life support," heart emoji. In the picture, Amias was sitting next to Emma, his face slightly turned to the side, a workbook in front of them. I laughed in anger, grabbing the vase beside me and throwing it at the wall. The shards scattered everywhere, and I closed my eyes in exhaustion. Amias and I had been through college romance, survived the hardships of society, and withstood the erosion of time. 6 years I had loved him as a habit, and now a single Charlotte had easily destroyed it all. I waited on the couch all night. Amias didn't come home. I stared at the gradually brightening sky outside, my eyes sore, yet my mind was strangely clear. 6 years. I had loved enough. "What are you doing sitting here?" Amias's voice snapped me out of my thoughts, and I turned to look at him. "Is the parents' meeting over?" He nodded and pulled out his car keys. "I'll take you home first. I have to go back to the office after this." I knew this was his way of signaling that he wanted to make up. He rarely compromised or softened his tone in front of me. Whenever I was angry, he would give me the cold treatment. It was rare for him to offer an olive branch like this. I moved aside and replied indifferently, "No need, I have other things to do." His brow furrowed in annoyance, thinking I was just throwing a tantrum. He grabbed my wrist and said in a low voice, "Stop making a scene, okay? At the parents' meeting today, Emma didn't have a father there. She didn't want to be looked down upon by the other kids. If it had been before, I would have followed his words, comforted him, and understood his concerns. But now a slight sense of disgust rose in my heart. I stopped walking and quietly looked into his eyes. "Amias, you're hurting me." He suddenly let go of my wrist. I ignored him and turned toward the administration building. Amias, furious, was about to chase after me and say something. But just then Charlotte's voice, choked with tears, came from behind us. "Ami, have I caused you trouble again?" Amias's steps immediately halted, and he turned around to gently reassure her. I let out a cold laugh and quickly walked away from this unfortunate place. Chapter 3. "Ah, Ms. Lee, why didn't you tell me earlier that you are Director Lee's daughter? This is..." The principal jumped up from his chair, holding my transfer application in his hand. "Director Lee already called me. Everything is arranged for your transfer. Don't worry, the approval will come through soon." I nodded slightly. "Thank you, Principal. My father is the director of the Education Bureau in Beijing, and I had originally studied education to take over his position. But after graduation, Amias insisted on staying in this city to start his business. I made a hard decision and gave up the path my family had planned for me to stay with him. For years, my father was angry and didn't speak to me. My mother would complain and beg me to return home during every holiday. I had never been a good daughter. Holding the transfer form, I looked at the red stamp on it, feeling a wave of relief. This wasn't just a form. It was the wings of my freedom. By the way, I suddenly remembered something. Please keep this confidential, Principal. It's just a regular teacher transfer. Don't let anyone else know, especially the school board." The principal paused for a moment and then said, "Don't worry, I promise it won't leak. Amias is a member of the school board. If he finds out I'm leaving, there will surely be endless discussions. Just because of Amias's words, I want us to have a home. I gave up my future and obediently played the role of a housewife for 6 years. We fought many times because of this. Amias would kneel by my side and cry, saying, 'Lara, I'm just so afraid of losing you. You're so good, and I really feel insecure. Seeing his tears and pleas, I softened. Now thinking back, anger rises within me. Even when I was promoted to class teacher, he was upset. Just then, Charlotte had returned to the country with her daughter. Charlotte would get jealous if he didn't answer her calls, relying on him for everything big or small. He seemed to enjoy it. I broke down crying, smashing furniture and yelling at him to come home immediately. At first, Amias would patiently comfort me, but later he became more and more impatient. Eventually, he stopped saying anything at all, slamming doors and walking away, leaving me alone to vent and then slowly cool down. Now I finally figured it out. I was once a free dove, but love clouded my mind, making me fight to be a canary in a cage. How ridiculous! In the past 6 years, my emotions had never been as calm and light as they were now. Fortunately, I'm still young. Fortunately, I never signed that marriage certificate. I still have the courage to start over. After coming to this realization, I began spending more time in the library and training rooms every day. Although I'm about to transfer back to the Beijing Education Bureau, there's still so much I need to catch up on. I need more research results and certificates to establish myself in the new position. The last time I humiliated Amias at school, he almost didn't come home. I know he's angry at me. He's waiting for me to apologize. He knows I can't stand the silent treatment and will come running like I've done countless times before. Meanwhile, Charlotte has been posting frequently on her social media. Finally, it's summer vacation. I can go out with the two most important people in my life. The fireworks at Disney are so beautiful. It's even better when you watch them with the ones you love, heart emoji. In the pictures, they are standing together under the dazzling fireworks, sweet and happy. The comment section was filled with well wishes and envy from other parents, lively and cheerful. Chapter 4. I remembered Amias's promise to take me to Disney to fulfill my dreams. I couldn't help but sneer as I casually scrolled through my phone, calmly liking her post. A rotten cucumber. Whoever wants it can pick it up. A few days later, she finally couldn't hold back and sent me a private message. Laura, sorry about this. These past few days I've been borrowing Amias to play with Emma. I hope it didn't affect you too. Laura, Amias said he hasn't had this much fun in a long time. I smiled faintly and replied, thanks for keeping him entertained. Charlotte didn't expect me to be so generous. The typing indicator lingered for a while, but she didn't reply. I could feel her resentment through the screen, and I felt rather pleased. For the past few days, Amias hadn't come home. I've been waking up naturally every day, not having to worry about taking care of anyone. The rest of my time was spent at the library studying. I used to be so foolish, acting as Amias's nanny and secretary. From now on, Laura would only belong to herself. I stretched lazily and in a good mood started packing my things. The transfer approval came through this week, so I began preparing to move. Today when I got home, I found a familiar figure sitting on the sofa. Amias was back. He looked at me, furrowing his brow. Why is the house so messy? I just wanted to tidy things up, I answered vaguely, not wanting to confront him so soon. Now you care about the house. He believed me, sneering coldly. I didn't respond and kept packing. Seeing that I wasn't speaking, his expression softened a little. I've told you before, don't focus so much on your career. You should spend more time with the other wives, have a few cups of tea, chat, go for some spa treatments. Isn't that better? I couldn't help but raise my head and look at him. Is that all I'm worth to you? His brow furrowed again, and his tone became impatient and harsh. Why are you bringing this up again? I interrupted him with a half-smile. I remember you once said that when you first told me you liked me, I was standing at the podium, not the kitchen. Amias was stunned momentarily, at a loss for words. When he spoke again, his voice softened significantly. Laura, I just want you to rely on me more. That way, your life would be easier. I couldn't be bothered to say more, and lowered my head to continue sorting my things. Suddenly, my phone rang. A notification from the class group caught my attention. Emma at Teacher Lee, when will my dad come home? Emma at Teacher Lee, can you please give my dad back to me? Reading those two messages, my heart sank. I felt a wave of anger and frustration build up in my chest like a tight knot that I couldn't untangle. Chapter 5. Emma's two blunt messages in the group instantly stirred up a storm, with parents flooding the chat one after another. Oh my God, what's the relationship between Teacher Lee and Emma's dad? Isn't this kind of interfering with someone else's family? There's such a big scandal. Aren't Emma's parents supposed to be in a loving marriage? Emma's mom, if you need a lawyer, you can contact me. Don't listen to rumors. The child probably just doesn't understand what she's saying. You're defending the mistress? What kind of person does that make you? The group chat was like water splashing into hot oil, boiling over in a chaotic uproar. It was clear Charlotte was using public opinion to corner me. I originally wanted to leave gracefully, but since someone wasn't willing to, I had no choice but to make things more drastic. Amy has noticed something was off with my expression and was about to come over, but just in time his phone rang. It was Charlotte calling. He glanced at me, seeing my mocking look but not understanding why. Frustrated and agitated, he turned and went to the balcony to answer the call. The argument in the group chat grew more intense, and as I scrolled down, I became surprisingly calm despite my fury. This private school was expensive and exclusive, with families that were either rich or influential. Most of the parents in the group were high-profile figures in various industries. Amias had brought me in as a teacher so that I could meet these wealthy wives, helping him with his future career. I scoffed. Unfortunately for them, I wasn't some ordinary wife, I was a real heiress. If anyone was going to climb the social ladder, it would be them trying to attach themselves to me. Charlotte had been quick to cozy up to the group of wealthy women from the first day, hosting gift exchanges and tea parties. She made quite a scene. Amias like gentle, dependent women, so Charlotte had donned lace dresses, obediently playing the part of the precious bird in the gilded cage. He liked a supportive wife, so Charlotte made being Mrs. Ami her life's goal. But of course, a bird in a gilded cage, no matter how golden, would always be looking over its shoulder, worrying about being replaced. And here she was, claws out, coming for me. Amias finished his call and, with an apologetic look, sat down beside me. Laura, Charlotte just called to explain. She said the kid is just being mischievous and doesn't understand. Please don't take it to heart. I remained cold-faced and didn't respond. Knowing he was in the wrong, he persisted. Tomorrow I'll have Charlotte invite you over and apologize. I pursed my lips. She ruined my reputation in front of so many people in that group. She should apologize publicly. Laura, isn't that a bit too much? He suddenly raised his voice, shouting at me. The child is also in that group. How do you expect her to feel? You're a teacher. You should know better. His yell stunned me. And have you thought about how your fiancé is being slandered as the other woman? He realized he had lost control, rubbing his forehead in frustration and muttering. The semester's almost over. I'll take care of your resignation soon. You can just stay home, and you won't have to worry about these rumors anymore. I looked at the man before me, and a wave of absurdity and disbelief hit me. Had he truly lost himself so completely that he was willing to do this for Charlotte? 6 years, over 2,000 days spent together. What was it all for? In the end, it was all empty. He didn't even care about the reputation of his fiancée. This had gone far beyond just infidelity. In that moment, I questioned his character entirely, and a bitter laugh rose within me. Had I really wasted 6 years of my youth on someone like this? The last shred of respect and decency I had for him vanished, and all that was left was a deep disgust. Fine. Listen to you. I'm leaving anyway. When Amias heard me say this, he let out a sigh of relief, his face showing a hint of surprise. He stepped forward to hug me, his tone softening. I knew Laura was the best. Once this is all sorted out, we can start planning our wedding. He clung to me, burying his face in my neck like when we were first in love. I subtly avoided his arms and said coolly, I'm tired. I'm going to rest. He froze for a moment, about to lash out, but then seemed to remember the hurt I just endured. He suppressed his emotions and said dryly, Okay, rest well. I'll handle the rest. I grabbed my laptop and headed to the study. As I closed the door, I glanced at him, confused. Something seemed different about Amias lately. He was offering me this grace now, something he'd never done before. Had he suddenly had a change of heart? It didn't matter. None of this concerned me anymore. I looked at the flight details on my phone. It was for 7:30 p.m. on Saturday. Chapter 6. This was my first time meeting Charlotte alone. And as expected, it would probably be the last. We met at a cafe not far from Amy's office, convenient for him to play the knight in shining armor and rush to my rescue. I stirred my coffee, sneering inwardly. Laura, you wanted to see me? Charlotte, dressed in a white dress with her long hair cascading over her shoulders, hurried over and sat down across from me. She looked like a naive, innocent girl, completely unaware of the real world. I didn't bother with small talk and slapped my phone on the table. These 2 messages in the parents group were sent by you, right? Sorry, she began, but I raised my hand to interrupt. No need to pretend. There's no one else here. She stared at me, then suddenly smiled. Laura, you're not as virtuous as he says. What are you trying to do? Why make a scene? No matter how much you make trouble, Amy's won't love you anymore. I locked eyes with her. Who's making a scene here? It's you who brought it into the class group. I can step aside and let the 2 of you be together, but if you mess with my career, I won't let you off so easily. Charlotte's expression shifted to one of irritation. She picked up her coffee and took a sip. Career. Stop playing the wise, independent woman. The only issue here is Amy's. If you leave him, I wouldn't have to do this. Hearing what I'd expected, I smiled. How does it feel to have been the other woman for so many years, Charlotte? Her face twisted in fury like a cat with its tail stepped on. I'm not the other woman. When Amy's and I were kids, where were you? You think those years were just handed to you? You stole my life, don't you know that? Seeing her so riled up only made me more amused. Although you ruined our engagement ceremony, we already signed a prenuptial agreement. The house you live in is in my name, and I also own 20% of Amy's company. No matter how you argue, you're still at best the nominal other woman. Charlotte's grip tightened around the cup, and she raised her hand as if to throw it at me. But before she could, I swiftly poured a steaming hot chocolate all over her, drenching her in the rich brown liquid. The dark chocolate melted from her hair, dripping down onto her white dress, completely ruining it. She looked as though she had just fallen into a pit of mud. She screamed uncontrollably. Are you crazy, Laura? You lunatic. I calmly pulled out 2 bills, folded them neatly, and placed them under the saucer as cleaning fees. I wiped my hands slowly and continued. By the way, I've already called the police. It's hard to explain things to someone like you. But maybe you should know that slander and defamation in public are criminal offenses. I won't drop the charges. A sentence of less than 3 years in prison, and it'll stay on your record. You really thought I was at home crying these past few days? I shot her a look full of contempt, watching her clench her teeth in rage. I nodded slightly toward the direction behind her. I can tell you want Amy's to be Emma's father, but sorry, this child is better off with her real father raising her. Charlotte's anger shifted to confusion. She turned her head in disbelief. A man, disheveled but with a dangerous gleam in his eyes, approached and grabbed her arm. Damn it! You've made it hard for me to find her. What, you think you can have my daughter marry some rich man? First, ask her father if he agrees. Thomas, Charlotte's ex-husband. They had met in H country, and from the first moment, Thomas had aggressively pursued Charlotte. Gold jewelry and luxury brands flowed freely from him, and he played the part of a wealthy second-generation heir. He charmed Charlotte so thoroughly that they quickly married, and they had a daughter, Emma. But after Emma was born, Charlotte realized that Thomas was just an illegal immigrant with no money and a massive debt. Frightened, she fled back to her home country with Emma, seeking Amy's help. What a shame. It was all so well hidden, but I found it. After seeing the rumors in the group, I quickly conducted some research to uncover the connections and eventually led Thomas here. Chapter 7. Thomas was a thug, and now that he had Charlotte in his grasp, there was no way he would let her off easily. He yanked her arm and dragged her toward the door. You damn woman, you think you can run away? No matter where you go, Emma is still my daughter. How much did you get for selling out Amy's daughter? I'll make you pay for this. Charlotte was trembling in fear, screaming. I don't know him. Help! I don't know this man. A brave waiter approached, attempting to intervene. Would you like me to call the police, ma'am? Thomas pulled out their marriage certificate from his pocket and slammed it onto the table. We're legally married, so stay out of this or I'll make you regret it. I gently stopped the waiter. It's fine, I've already called the police. Before I could finish my sentence, Amias finally arrived. He first saw me, frowned, and said, "What are you doing here? I told you I was busy today." "Amias." He froze, then turned around. His beloved Charlotte, now drenched in hot chocolate, was sitting on the ground, covered in dirt and looking completely disheveled. Just as his face changed, Thomas punched him, sending Amias crashing to the floor. With Charlotte's scream, the two men quickly became entangled, fighting in a wild frenzy. I sat back calmly on the high stool, leisurely eating a freshly baked tiramisu, waiting for the final act to unfold. In the distance, the sound of police sirens grew louder. Satisfied, I picked up the folder I had prepared earlier. Everything was about to end. I had carefully packed all the property agreements Amias and I had made, all our love photos and records from university to work, as well as the history of Charlotte and her ex-husband. I also included the full video footage from the cafe. The folder's cover was designed as an engagement invitation for me and Amias, and I sent it to the group. All the photos and records of our sweet moments, our love, were evidence of what we had shared. 6 years of companionship, countless memories that I had been planning to play at our wedding. The library desks we studied at together, the graduation ceremonies we attended, our first move into a new home, and all the life items we bought to fill it. There were travel photos from different places and many meals we shared. But somewhere along the line, Charlotte had wormed her way into the timeline of our shared memories. What was once love, now tainted and spoiled, had become a sharp blade. I pulled it out of my chest and stabbed it mercilessly into these two dogs, these two shameless individuals. As soon as the invitation went out, it caused an even bigger storm in the group of wealthy wives. If Charlotte's earlier messages had made some of the wives merely watch and wait, uncertain of which side to take, my folder was the final blow. It crushed this couple, turning the gossip and rumors into a public execution. The wives in the group reacted fiercely, mocking, laughing, and enraged. They were all women who enjoyed the luxury of their homes, and nothing infuriated them more than a third party disrupting a family. Some sharp-eyed wives recognized Amias's name and immediately announced that their companies would no longer be working with him. The school's board of directors was also alerted, and under pressure from all sides, Amias was temporarily suspended and put under review. In an instant, public opinion was turned on its head, and it all started with me. Some curious onlookers even reached out to try to ally themselves with me, hoping to get close to the future Mrs. Amias. But I knew better than to get involved. I wasn't Amias's wife, and I never would be. These women were just angry about a third party disrupting their world, and Charlotte had hit their shared interests. As for me, I wasn't one of them. On top of that, I submitted all the defamation evidence against Charlotte to the police and insisted that I wouldn't drop the charges. Chapter 8. Since that meeting at the cafe, Amias and I never saw each other again. Thomas took Emma and demanded a huge ransom from Amias. They were now hiding in a slum on the west side of the city. Charlotte was formally arrested on charges of extortion, while Amias, torn between worrying about Emma and trying to leverage every connection he had to protect Charlotte, found himself in an impossible situation. In the end, Charlotte was sentenced to 2 years in prison. This was the best sentence I could secure for her, thanks to the pressure from my father. Once everything was settled, I pulled out my SIM card and tossed it into the trash at the airport, walking away without a second glance at the place I had called home for the last 6 years. From the plane looking down at the city below, I felt no attachment, only a deep sense of anticipation for the new life ahead. Amias, from this moment on, our lives will never cross again. Epilogue. When I found out that Laura had left, I was stunned. I locked myself away and drank a lot of alcohol alone. I turned off my phone, and anyone who tried to reach me was out of my concern. My life felt hollowed out, as if a part of me had been taken, and that part had been Laura. I had always thought she would quietly sit on the couch year after year beside me, that once I dealt with all the messes, she would happily become my bride. In my drunken haze, I remembered the first time I saw Laura. It was at the freshman orientation ceremony. She was the representative for the outstanding new students, standing on stage giving a speech. I was her senior and also the host for that day. The girl stood confidently on stage in a little black dress. Every gesture, every move was graceful and natural. I could bet that nearly every male in the audience had their eyes on her. She was dazzling not because of delicate features, but because of a calm, effortless beauty. Her fingers were clean and soft, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. The second time I saw her was during the university's mathematical modeling competition. We were on the same team. As the only female and a freshman, people couldn't help but want to take care of her. But she turned out to be even more capable than we had imagined. We easily won first place, and at the celebratory dinner, I subtly moved away. The others sat next to her, blocking everyone's view, and finally caught her attention. From that day on, I frequently invited her to meals, to study in the library, and to participate in activities. I was increasingly impressed by her independence and excellence. During this time, many different guys were always around her. I used every excuse to stay as close as possible to her. She liked ambitious men, so I made sure to maintain the highest GPA in the whole grade. She liked smart and capable men, so I took part in various activities to improve myself. She loved psychology and philosophy, so I delved into those fields just so I could have common topics with her. She was like the moon, always calm and quiet, not flashy or ostentatious like the other girls, but still attracting people to her. Finally, during the summer after her first year, we officially started our relationship. How could someone as excellent as her be with someone like me? I'd never been so uncertain and insecure about a woman before. Before her, I'd only liked my neighbor girl, Charlotte. She was obedient and gentle, never asked for much from me, and simply revolved around me. I just needed to enjoy that. But Laura, she always made me feel uneasy. She was hardworking, emotionally stable, exceptional, and treated me very well as a girlfriend, but why did I always feel like she wasn't really mine? If only she were a little more ordinary, a little more plain, then maybe she'd never leave me. Through hard work and persistence, I eventually secured a job offer from a well-known local company right after graduation. But at that moment, Laura hesitated and told me that her parents wanted her to move back to the capital city for work. In the capital, there were rich young men everywhere. Would she still love me if she went back? I didn't accept long-distance relationships, and I definitely wouldn't accept her leaving me. Under my persuasion, she gave up her future and decided to stay, even though she had a huge fight with her family about it. I felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction and relief. This time only I was in her life. I was her everything. Charlotte's return to China was unexpected yet familiar. She was still wearing the same white dress, standing before me. The power I once had over her was back in my hands. I arranged housing for her and set up her life. She sweetly called me Ami Gij. Hearing this once again, I felt guilty and glanced at Laura. She seemed natural, not a hint of jealousy in her expression. For some reason, I felt inexplicably irritated. That calm and composed demeanor in Laura, which I had once admired, now seemed intolerable. I began staying out late, accepting Charlotte's invitations with hidden motives, pretending to forget our anniversary and even her birthday. Finally, as I wished, Laura started to fall apart, throwing things and crying. I felt unexpectedly surprised and pleased. I quickly went to comfort her. The more she broke down, the more twisted satisfaction I felt. This once untouchable flower willing to act like a little girl for me. How satisfying. But as her breakdowns became more frequent, I grew increasingly impatient. Didn't she understand when to stop? Charlotte understood that well. Her tears were just enough to make me pity her without ever becoming tiresome. Looking back now, I realize what a bastard I was. Only real tears are true loss and collapse. Beneath all those emotions was her true love for me. How many times did she cry in silence out of my sight? When did she stop crying? And when did she hand in that resignation letter? I threw the bottle aside and looked at the apartment. Laura hadn't packed much to leave, only some clothes. It was as if she was just going on a trip and would return soon. She vanished as if she had evaporated, and I used all my connections to search for her but found no trace. It felt as though these 6 years had just been a fleeting dream in my life. Because of that scandal, my career suffered. I resigned voluntarily, stepped down from all my positions, and even signed an agreement not to work in the same industry for the next 3 years. But the truth was, it wasn't as bad as quitting. I just wanted to make a more drastic, irreversible move. Would Laura pity me and come back? She would forgive me, she loved me that much. Charlotte was already in prison, and I hadn't seen Emma again. Thomas came to see me once. In the midst of our argument, he swung his fist, knocking me to the ground. In that moment of daze, I remembered the scene at the cafe. It had been just like this. She had taken a bite of cake and calmly looked at me. I tried to remember, staring at her blurry face, trying to find some trace of love and reluctance. But I found nothing. All I heard were Thomas's curses and slaps. My eyes closed and I fainted. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. My parents and a few former colleagues were sitting by my side. I looked at them one by one, confirming their faces, but I couldn't find Laris. It couldn't be. Just couldn't be. Lara couldn't be so heartless as to not want to see me in this state. Suddenly, I went mad and grabbed the 4-drip, throwing it across the room, shouting that I wanted to see my fiancé. My mother trembled, holding my shoulder and grabbing my hand. "Son, she won't come back. She won't come back. Please calm down. Don't scare your mother." It couldn't be. It couldn't. I shook her hand off and walked out of the room. Where could she go? She wouldn't leave me. She loved me that much, I muttered to myself as I walked. Suddenly, a group of doctors rushed in and pinned me down. "Hurry, this patient has gone mad. Sedative. Sedative." My body seemed to be held down by countless arms. Someone twisted my arm and injected me with a shot. After a dizzying blur, I saw a white light. For a moment, I thought I saw Lara's face. She was still wearing that black dress, standing on the podium. Her eyes were clear, but they didn't fall on me. I struggled desperately, screaming, using all my strength to try and run toward her. But the image grew farther and farther away until it finally sank into darkness. I closed my eyes in despair, knowing that I had lost her forever.